Welcome back to MUZEa. This is the 20th episode of our series, The Story Behind the Painting. Today we're stepping into the 16th century, a time of religious upheaval, brutal warfare, and some of the most flamboyant fashion in history. At the center of it all is a painting that turns a classical Greek myth into a gritty Swiss political statement. We're looking at Niklaus Manuel Deutsch's The Judgement of Paris. Why is the goddess of wisdom wearing a soldier's hat? And why does the hero look like a man who just walked off a bloody battlefield? Let's uncover the layers of a masterpiece that is as much about the dangers of desire as it is about the price of war.
Welcome to Story Behind the Painting, where we dive into the most famous artworks and learn a lot from that.
To truly appreciate the Judgement of Paris, we have to step into the shoes of the creator. Niklaus Manuel Deutsch wasn't just an observer of his time, he was one of its most active participants. At MUZEa, we often see artists who lived in isolation, but Manuel was the opposite. He was a man of action, a poet, a high-ranking statesman, and a seasoned veteran of the legendary Swiss expeditions. Born in Bern around 1484, Manuel's journey is a classic story of ambition. He was the son of an apothecary who dealt in rare spices and pigments. While he grew up surrounded by the colors of the trade, he sought a larger stage. In the 16th century, the path to influence was through the Great Italian Wars, and Manuel didn't hesitate to join the ranks. Manuel was a Reisläufer, part of the elite Swiss forces sought after by every major power in Europe. This wasn't just a job, it was a front-row seat to the Renaissance. He spent years crossing the Alps, witnessing the height of Italian fashion and the intensity of continental conflict firsthand. We know from his personal records that his life was a balancing act between family, art, and public duty. He eventually rose to become a member of the Great Council of Bern, transitioning from a man of the field to a man of the state. His history is etched into every brushstroke, reflecting the physical reality of a man who knew weight and steel. Notice the dagger Minerva carries, a specific Swiss design that Manuel actually carried himself. He often used a stylized image of this blade as his personal signature on his artwork. This is the dual life of Niklaus Manuel, a satirist who challenged the status quo and a leader who helped shape his city. When he painted Paris, he wasn't just retelling a legend, he was reflecting the faces of the people he had led. This lived experience brings a breathtaking, grounded realism to the canvas. In Manuel's world, beauty was never fragile. It was bold, armored, and deeply connected to power. To the casual observer, this is a scene from ancient Greece, but look closer, and the myth of the Trojan War begins to look more like a high-stakes meeting in 16th century Bern. First, let's set the stage. The myth tells of a golden apple inscribed with the words, "For the fairest." When the goddesses Juno, Minerva, and Venus all claimed it, the task of choosing a winner fell to Paris. In traditional art, Paris is often a humble shepherd, but Manuel subverts the classical entirely by portraying Paris as a magnificent mercenary. He sits with an air of bold confidence, and his clothing reflects the peak of contemporary fashion. He isn't just judging beauty. He is a man of the world making a strategic choice. Juno, the queen of the gods, is portrayed in an opulent, slashed dress that signals elite status. This slashed fashion was a status symbol where owners cut fabric to reveal expensive linings beneath. For Manuel's audience, Juno represented the pinnacle of high-class marriage and domestic wealth. Next to her is Minerva transformed into a literal soldier wearing a plumed toque. By dressing the goddess of wisdom as a local soldier, Manuel links divine intelligence with tactical skill. She wears a golden-hilted dagger at her waist, as a sign of martial readiness. Finally, we have the winner Venus, embodying the Gothic ideal of pale, frosty beauty. Her transparent shift symbolizes what the era called the perilous power of women. She is the embodiment of the temptation that would eventually lead Paris and his city to ruin. Manuel literally spells out identities with floating old German inscriptions near the figures' heads. One label names Paris of Troy, but adds a biting critique calling him the foolish. Around the golden apple, the text reads, "This apple for the fairest," and acts like a 16th century comic caption.
These floating words guide the viewer through a story of beauty, bad decisions, and inevitable consequences.
To modernize, these soldiers look like they're dressed for a parade, not a pitiless battlefield. But in Niklaus Manuel's Switzerland, fashion was a trophy. This was the era of slashed clothing. Legend has it that after the Battle of Grandson, Swiss soldiers patched their tattered uniforms with scraps of expensive silk and velvet looted from the enemy tents. By the time this painting was commissioned, slashing had become a craze. It was a visual shout of "I survived and I am rich." When Manuel paints Juno in Paris in these extravagant cutaway garments, he isn't just being decorative. He is showing us a society that had suddenly moved from a simple agricultural life into one of extreme, often reckless, international wealth. But with this new wealth came new moral dilemmas. In the eyes of the 16th century public, Paris was not a hero, he was a warning. By choosing Venus over Juno's power or Minerva's wisdom, he was seen as a man who had abandoned his civic and moral duties for a fleeting moment of beauty. For a city like Bern, on the verge of the Reformation, this judgment was a critique of excess. There is a much darker, more literal subtext hidden in the glow of Venus's skin. Soldiers returning from the Italian wars often brought back more than just looted silk. They brought back a devastating health crisis that was sweeping across Europe. In Bern, authorities were forced to open pox houses to isolate and treat these casualties of the era's lifestyle. In this context, the perilous power of Venus was not just a metaphor. The artist, who later oversaw administration of these very health clinics, used this canvas to communicate a stern message. He warned that the pursuit of unrestrained pleasure often led to a tragic physical decline. To the soldiers of Bern, the Judgment of Paris was a reminder that every choice has a cost. Some prizes are far more dangerous than they appear. In Manuel's hands, the Greek myth becomes a contemporary mirror. It asks the viewer, in a world of gold and steel, what are you willing to sacrifice for the things you desire?
Every masterpiece has a silent partner. In the shadows of this forest, hanging almost like fruit from the trees, are two coats of arms. These are the signatures of power. One features a bluish swan, the other a square white well. These symbols identify the patron as Benedict Brunner, a prominent member of the small council of Bern. Brunner wasn't just buying a painting, he was buying a piece of intellectual status. By commissioning a work that blended classical mythology with Swiss pride, he was signaling cultured leadership. It was a statement of local identity. We have the steel, we have the gold, and we have the art. This brings us to Niklaus Manuel's true contribution to art history. He bridged a massive cultural divide. He took the Italian Renaissance's love for grand mythological narratives and fused it with northern tactile detail. He wanted his goddesses to have weight, texture, and a presence you could almost feel. He proved that the ancient world could live and breathe in the cold air of the Swiss Alps. Perhaps the most fascinating part of Manuel's story is how it ended. As the Swiss Reformation swept through Bern in the late 1520s, the city's relationship with art changed overnight. The very images Manuel had spent his life perfecting were suddenly labeled as idolatrous. Rather than fighting the tide, Manuel wrote it. He essentially retired his brushes to become a full-time political leader and reformer. He spent his final years overseeing the removal of religious art from churches, the very same types of images he once created. He traded the palette for the podium, using his voice to shape the laws and health of the city. The Judgment of Paris remains one of the last great flashes of his creative fire before the Reformation changed the face of Europe forever. As we step back from the canvas, we realize that the Judgment of Paris is far more than a simple retelling of a Greek myth. It is a mirror held up to 1520s Bern, a society standing at a crossroads. It captures a world defined by extreme wealth, the intensity of continental shifts, and the eternal struggle between duty and desire. Every detail we've explored tells the story of Niklaus Manuel himself. He was a man who lived between worlds, the elegance of the studio and the reality of the field. He balanced the tradition of the past and the reformation of the future. This is the essence of what we do here at MUZEa. We don't just look at art, we look through it to find the pulse of the people who created it. Niklaus Manuel didn't just paint a choice, he painted the soul of an era.
If you want to step inside this world yourself, the MUZEa app is your gateway. Our interactive guides bring the museum experience directly to your pocket. Download MUZEa on the App Store or Google Play and start your own journey through the world's greatest masterpieces.
Welcome to Story Behind the Painting, where we dive into the most famous art routes and learn a lot from that.